Hello, everybody. I hope all is well wherever you happen to be. I'm going to read the entirety of the New York Times opinion editorial piece that was published by an anonymous Trump administration official. I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration. Subtitled, I work for the president, but like-minded colleagues and I have vowed to thwart parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. New York Times published a brief introductory statement. The Times is taking the rare step of publishing an anonymous op-ed essay. We have done so at the request of the author, a senior official in the Trump administration, whose identity is known to us and whose job would be jeopardized by its disclosure. We believe publishing this essay anonymously is the only way to deliver an important perspective to our readers. We invite you to submit a question about the essay or our vetting process here. So they are putting their illustrious reputation behind these statements, and there's no real reason to believe that they don't have an insider source. To begin, President Trump is facing a test to his presidency unlike any faced by a modern American leader. It's not just that the special counsel looms large or that the country is bitterly divided over Mr. Trump's leadership or even that his party might well lose the House to an opposition hell-bent on his downfall. The dilemma, which he does not fully grasp, probably because information is being kept from him, is that many of the senior officials in his own administration are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. I would know. I am one of them. To be clear, ours is not the popular resistance of the left. We want the administration to succeed and think that many of its policies have already made America safer and more prosperous, but we believe our first duty is to this country, and the president continues to act in a manner that is detrimental to the health of our republic. In your eyes. That is why many Trump appointees have vowed to do what we can to preserve our democratic institutions while thwarting Mr. Trump's more misguided impulses until he is out of office. The root of the problem is the president's amorality. Anyone who works with him knows he is not moored to any discernible first principles that guide his decision-making. Although he was elected as a Republican, the president shows little affinity for ideals long espoused by conservatives, free minds, free markets, and free people. At least they espouse those ideals. At best, he has invoked these ideals in scripted settings. At worst, he has attacked them outright. In addition to his mass marketing of the notion that the press is the enemy of the people, President Trump's impulses are generally anti-trade and anti-democratic. Don't get me wrong, there are bright spots that the near ceaseless negative coverage of the administration fails to capture: effective deregulation, historic tax reform, a more robust military, and more. These successes have come despite, not because of, the president's leadership style, which is impetuous, adversarial, petty, and ineffective. From the White House to executive branch departments and agencies, senior officials will privately admit their daily disbelief at the commander-in-chief's comments and actions. Most are working to insulate their operations from his whims. Meetings with him veer off topic and off the rails. He engages in repetitive rants, and his impulsiveness results in half-baked, ill-informed, and occasionally reckless decisions that have to be walked back. Quote, there is literally no telling whether he might change his mind from one minute to the next, end quote, a top official complained to me recently, exasperated by an Oval Office meeting at which the president flip-flopped on a major policy decision he'd made only a week earlier. It's kind of sad that we can't determine which of the flip-flops that was just from that vague description. There's been so many. The erratic behavior would be more concerning if it weren't for unsung heroes in and around the White House. Some of his aides have been cast as villains by the media, but in private they have gone to great lengths to keep bad decisions contained to the West Wing, though they are clearly not always successful. It may be cold comfort in this chaotic era, but Americans should know that there are adults in the room. The condescension of that statement is insane. We fully recognize what is happening. Like, who elected him? Adults. And we are trying to do what's right, even when Donald Trump won't, in the anonymous author's eyes. The result is a two-track presidency. Take foreign policy. In public and in private, President Trump shows a preference for autocrats and dictators, such as President Vladimir Putin of Russia and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, and displays little genuine appreciation for the ties that bind us to allied, like-minded nations. Astute observers have noted, though, that the rest of the administration is operating on another track, one where countries like Russia are called out for meddling and punished accordingly, and where allies around the world are engaged as peers rather than ridiculed as rivals. On Russia, for instance, the president was reluctant to expel so many of Mr. Putin's spies as punishment for the poisoning of a former Russian spy in Britain. He complained for weeks about senior staff members letting him get boxed into further confrontation with Russia, and he expressed frustration that the United States continued to impose sanctions on the country for its malign behavior. But his national security team knew better. Such actions had to be taken to hold Moscow accountable. I agree, but I'll get to the end. This isn't the work of the so-called deep state. Why the defensive statement? It's the work of the steady state. That's not more comforting. Given the instability many witnessed, there were early whispers within the cabinet of invoking the 25th Amendment, which would start a complex process for removing the president. But no one wanted to precipitate a constitutional crisis, so we will do what we can to steer the administration in the right direction until, one way or another, it's over. The bigger concern is not what Mr. Trump has done to the presidency, but whether what we as a nation have allowed him to do to us. We have sunk low with him and allowed our discourse to be stripped of civility. Senator John McCain put it best in his farewell letter: all Americans should heed his words and break free of the tribalism trap with the high aim of uniting through our shared values and love of this great nation. And signed Anonymous. There's a lot there. This is the deep state. This is the deep state. And I don't disagree with everything that he's saying. I don't agree with Trump. I'm a black libertarian. There's not a whole lot we can get along on because he's a protectionist and we just don't share a lot of ideas policy-wise. But I do believe that the people elected this man. I mean, when you're dealing with the deep state, and that's a catchphrase. If you want to know serious information about the deep state, I guess I'll just post the 25th Amendment text so you'll have something. But if you want to know what the deep state is in a technical sense, go back to Max Weber's work, and you could just look up the bureaucracies. Weber identified these bureaucracies as sort of being, like he said, the steady state. People who were essentially clerks, people who handle documents, people who are filing things. These people don't tend to get completely shuffled out from administration to administration. The bosses of the agencies do, but those aren't elected officials. Those are appointees. So you're talking about the employees of appointees, some of which have had their job for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And they see administrations come and go and come and go, and the misdeeds of one administration might become secrets to the next administration. Meanwhile, they know it all. And it goes back to why I posted that video of Malcolm Nance on the Real Time with Bill Maher show, essentially bragging that the deep state was spying on John Kennedy and facilitated his assassination and laughing about it in front of Bill Maher. This is they believe, because they do have this knowledge that they legitimately or illegitimately keep from us. So like we have to have a Freedom of Information Act request and already know what we're looking for to get information from these people, and they're not helpful. But they use that information asymmetry to say, we know better than you. We are an authority and we should be listened to. We know better than the president. We know what to do. Don't worry. The adults are in the room. Now, I don't care what you have to say about Trump. That mentality is dangerous. Unelected people thinking that they know better than elected officials and feel free to talk about this anonymously to the media. This is not a good deed either. I do agree Trump's efforts should be frustrated, but I'm not sure they should be frustrated surreptitiously by members of his own cabinet who are doing so because in their private judgment, they've decided what's the correct decision, what's right and wrong, what are the proper first principles, and what this man who was elected by, 42%, 45%, I can't remember the numbers, of the electorate, that's millions of people, and they decided that his policies were the policies they want, even if it's not the policies that I want, even if it's the policies I think are dumb. I think the wall is stupid. I don't think that we need to increase military spending. There are a lot of things I don't agree on, but I do agree that Trump is the guy who won the election, and nobody ever elected any of these bureaucrats. And we as citizens need to push back on this mentality that these people have, that they are somehow in charge of the country, are more important than elected officials because they stick around for decade after decade after decade and keep secrets and hide people's skeletons and all sorts of dirt they may or may not have on our elected officials. That is a corrupting force that can't be rooted out. at some point. It's like a J. Edgar Hoover problem on a miniature scale. Anyway, as always, I appreciate you giving your time to listen to me. Your comments below, a like, a share, and a subscribe is always appreciated. You have a good morning, day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you happen to be when you hear my voice.